Good morning. This is the sermon for Advent Sunday, based on the readings from Luke and Jeremiah and Thessalonians. And my name is Emily Young, and I'm the Minister for King's Standing, Boldmere and Nechells in the Sutton Park Circuit. Christians are weird, and proudly so. When everyone else is getting ready to mark the end of the year, we are already starting a new one. Our new liturgical year, the Sunday when we start reading a new gospel, and a new set of readings is today. Happy New Year. This year we will be reading Luke's gospel, the doctor with his orderly account of the things which his reader Theophilus has already been taught, an account that covers Jesus' birth, life, death and resurrection. Then in the sequel Acts, the work of the disciples as they become apostles and the church comes into being. When everyone else is looking forward to celebrating the birth of baby Jesus, we hope, or more likely Father Christmas, we are multitasking, preparing to remember the birth of a baby who is so powerless, and yet the most powerful, so poor, and yet a king worshipped by angels and shepherds. Luke doesn't mention the Magi. And we're waiting for Jesus to come again, to complete his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, to bring justice and peace to an imperfect, fractious, and unjust world. When everyone else is reading a story forwards, from beginning to end, we work backwards through Advent. We begin at the end. Today's gospel reading is about Jesus' coming again. It is from near the end of Luke's gospel, not long before Jesus' death and the accounts of his resurrection. Then next week, we hear about the beginning of Jesus' public ministry and about John the Baptist's recognition of who he is. Finally, we hear the account of Mary's visit to Elizabeth before the births of John and Jesus. Our gospel reading today is about signs, or maybe simply stating that bad things will happen. Keep going, persevere, because one day, nobody knows when, Jesus will be coming again. It's a hard thing to hold on to. Mostly, we're not patient. We want quick fixes. We don't want to live with war, COVID, racism, poverty, injustice. We want Jesus to come and fix things right now, not sometime in the future. We don't know when. We don't want to have to work with Jesus to do some of the fixing. It's too hard. We're tired. We're busy. We can be hopeful, however. Jeremiah was writing to people whose temple had been destroyed, who had been taken into exile, or had seen other people exiled, who were wanting to return home. For them, the worst happened. The prophecy was supposed to comfort them. For Christians, we see the promise of a branch from David who will execute justice and righteousness in the land, fulfilled in the life of Jesus. When he talked about the kingdom, when he welcomed people who are poor, whose work made them outcasts, whose lifestyle didn't fit the norms of the community, when he welcomed children and healed the sick, when people began to imitate him, when he confronted the rich and the powerful, when he brought about justice, righteousness, healing, and peace. He started his kingdom. He brought the ways of heaven down to earth. When Jesus did that, Jesus showed that God keeps God's promises and that therefore there is hope. We wait this Advent, knowing that Jesus, fully God and fully human, Jesus Emmanuel, God with us, was born, lived, taught about the kingdom, showed us what a relationship with God could be like, who died and rose again, will come again. We wait alert to the signs of heaven breaking into earth. Whilst we wait in these always uncertain, always in between times, sad at the brokenness of life as it is, and hopeful and excited at being part of life as it could be. How should we live? The final reading today is from the letter by Paul to the Christians in Thessalonica. Paul, like many of us recently, longs to see the people he is writing to face, and to help them grow and learn more about their faith, to teach them to know God's ways and to follow Jesus. In the meantime, whilst he's kept apart from them, he encourages them to love one another and everyone, which is hard when you're waiting. Hard to do when we stick with people, hard to do when we are stuck with people all the time. Just remember, in the Greco-Roman Empire, people would have lived and worked with their households much of the time. It is hard for the churches to do when they had people from different countries and people who had different traditions in one place. Hard to do when some are very rich and used to being in charge and to try to boss the others around. Paul asks them to love one another and assures them of his love for them. But he expects something else as well. He expects that as they wait for Jesus to return, as they look for the signs of heaven breaking in, as they learn more about Jesus, as they pray and worship, as they try hard to act in a loving way towards each other, to behave in forgiving ways, they will be changed. That they and us will become more like Jesus. That they and us will become more holy, more Christ-like, and ready for Jesus to come again. There's a lovely quote about Advent. Advent is the time when we celebrate Christ's coming in history, mystery, and majesty. In history, in the birth, life, death of Jesus of Nazareth. In mystery, in the resurrected Christ's mysterious presence, where two or three gather, where bread is broken and wine is shared, where justice is done. In majesty, one day Christ will come in majesty, wiping away every tear and emptying every grave. So remember to look forwards as well as backwards this Advent, to the coming of Jesus of Nazareth, the baby in the manger, and to his coming again in majesty, whilst also being alert to the signs that the kingdom is already breaking in.